So welcome to the TMC Newsroom. This is Carl Ford, co-founder of 4GWE, here with Graham Celine of Azimuth Systems. Graham, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So here's the first question for you, okay? So you guys were sitting there minding your own business, working on Wi-Fi and making sure that works, and the whole world's come together with you now and followed up with OFDM and with MIMO. So now that we're right on the verge of LTE rolling out, tell us what you're seeing. Tell us about LTE and what's going on there.
Yeah, perfect analysis. Azimuth started out testing only Wi-Fi stuff, but as Wi-Fi moved into this multi-antenna MIMO world, using OFDM to improve the throughput with 802.11n, we saw an opportunity, a wave, and we've developed a product, a channel emulator that's specifically focused at validating the RF performance of multi-antenna technology. And that's, of course, expanded really well into the WiMAX and now particularly into the LTE world. And LTE has really taken a huge step in the last 9 to 12 months, where starting from vendors just evaluating, just thinking about what they're going to do, through to people really ganging up and charging forward to get this out to market as quickly as possible. They're not reaching the targets that they originally said. There were vendors that said they'd roll out and deploy in 2009. There are some test networks, but really everybody's gearing up for 2010. So as a test equipment company that comes along early in the cycle, we've had a great opportunity to work with some of the bigger vendors, with some of the major service providers, and of course with chipset guys to help them develop, test, and validate their products. And we're doing very well from that. We're having a good ride.
Okay, so now in the traditional world, we're right at the point where the chipsets are starting to get into, past the prototype stage and starting towards mass deployment. What's your typical vendor relationship right now? Is it guys looking for you to help them in the device design? Is it guys looking for you to help them with the overall expectation and network coverage? Where are they coming to you and saying, here's what scares me?
At this point, we're sitting December 2009. This is really still focused at the bigger players, the base station vendors and the chipset guys and service providers. It's not really extended out into the user equipment yet. Everybody's working at that, but the chipsets aren't really fully baked yet. So the base station vendors are building their own MAC-PHY out of FPGA discrete components, and so they're really out there testing heavily. The service providers are making decisions about which base stations to deploy in those networks, even though it may only be in 6 or 9 months' time. They're already making those choices. They're putting out the RFPs for that equipment, and they need to evaluate that equipment. They need to test it. They also need to do their own proofing and trialing before they start rolling out networks. So we've had mainly a focus on those larger vendors at this stage, and I think that in the next 6 to 9 months, this tier 2 vendors and the handset or client device vendors will start becoming much more active as you said, the chipsets start rolling out.
And on the base station side, there's lots of statements being made about exactly how many antennas are needed and the density that we should expect, because LTE is going to be so much more throughput in terms of traffic from the end user. So are you providing some sort of testing function on that kind of stuff? How are you helping the people do the analytics for there?
Oh, definitely. The LTE is defined today for 2x2, but nobody's doing 2x2. Everybody's doing more than that, especially on the base station side. And that's because the key values of MIMO are not just performance. Performance is great when you're close to the base station and you're getting your maximum capabilities out of it. Then you can do spatial streaming and double, triple, or quadruple your throughput. But the flip side of the value of MIMO is in reliability of the link, using diversity, transmit or receive diversity, and most important in beamforming. And beamforming lets you reach the range using LTE that you couldn't reach with other technologies. And so there we're seeing vendors already putting together base stations with 8 antennas, and they're using those antennas to do the beam steering and increase the range of LTE and get that performance much further away from the base station.
So now wait a minute, help me out here, because the expectation was we were going to see more base stations, and basically an increase in antennas because of that. But are you telling me that we're seeing some antenna innovation where in effect we can keep the same number of base stations and just add more antennas?
Well, base station density is always going to be dependent on where you're looking at it. In New York City, you're always going to have more and more and more base stations, and it's financially viable to put more and more because you've got more users. As soon as you get to rural, urban even areas, you can't put up base stations on every street corner, and so you really want to be able to reach distance. Those people also don't expect the throughput, and there's not that many people expecting throughput. So you really want to be able to get a base station, pinpoint a specific user, and direct your signal at that person so they're getting a very reliable signal. Once you're getting a reliable signal, they're also getting better throughput.
Okay. And a lot of this stuff has some algorithmic math associated with it that is kind of aimed at kind of tracking the user, you know. In my life, I've sat there and watched my cell phone, you know, go from disconnect to 5 bars immediately.
Right.
So are we going to see that same thing happen with LTE initially,
I think
or is MIMO going to cover that problem?
Initially, you probably will, but I think MIMO will cover it. Yeah, that's the intelligence of MIMO, and that's where a product like ours, channel emulation, becomes really important because that's the key difference between single antenna SISO, our current 3G technologies, and LTE. The future 3G or 4G technologies really lies is that you can take advantage of those multiple antennas and do different things with them. But they rely on the fact that there is a channel. In the past, in single antenna, channels were looked at as impairments, as a disturbance to the network. Now it's really, well, how does it work? Because as two antennas transmit towards a single user, well, the path from one to the user and the path from the other to the user is different. That's what allows the user to differentiate between those two signals. And so it's very important to, if you're testing the performance, to actually have a good channel. And that's where the algorithm tied together with real-world emulation that we provide in a channel emulator allows a vendor to take something that they would traditionally have to test in the field, have people running around in cars and with little meters and stuff to test it. Now they can take that, they can put it all in the lab, and they can do some significant testing in the lab.
Okay, and if people want to find out more about Azimuth, how would they do that?
www.azimuthsystems.com. We're on the web, and we've got people all around the world, and we'll be happy to talk to them.
And if they wanted to talk to you specifically, Graham, how should they connect up with you?
Marketing@azimuthsystems.com comes right to my email box.
Okay, that works too. So, Graham, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Carl.